Okay, well, for anybody who doesn't know who one or both of us is or are, or whatever, my name's Leah Twitchell. I have a dog training business called Canine Movement Lab, and I'm here with my friend Joanne Frame, and she has a business called Hounds Connect, and she helps dog owners understand themselves better so that they have a better relationship with their dogs, because so often something we don't realize is that our own personal stress and emotions can sort of
Hi, Nicolas.
actually get in the way of our relationship with our dogs. And so by examining that and looking at what those issues might be, we're able to have a clearer channel between ourselves and our dogs and sort of improve our relationships and our training. Did I
well,
explain that
I
correct?
think so. Well, if it makes sense, does it make sense to people listening? Anyway, chip in. What I would like to say is anyone that wants to say anything, all the way along, please chip in and we'll try and answer, or we'll try and bring it into the discussion, because that's really what we want, isn't it? This discussion to be about something that's not commonly talked about so much.
Joanne and I actually met because we both read Your Dog is Your Mirror by Kevin Behan, and we connected because we just felt so strongly that that really was the case, that your dog does reflect back to you what's going on with your inner emotional landscape. And then we started having these talks. In case anybody doesn't know, Joanne's in the UK right now. I'm in the US. So we've gotten to know each other through Skype and just discussing our relationships with our dogs and observing what goes on when we have stress in our lives and how it affects our dogs. So I guess I want to ask Joanne, what experiences in your own life led you to work with dogs and subsequently to focus on the owners?
Okay. Get right into the nitty-gritty straight away. I was a dog lover as a child, but I got back into dogs when I was a mother and working full-time, etc. Had kids and I wanted to get dogs in the family, and I decided to get hounds. I always loved hounds, and I decided I wanted a hound, but instead of just getting one, I bought 2 puppies that were hounds, and started to try training them, and didn't get very far, didn't have a lot of success. Got a lot of people telling me that hounds were difficult to train, and that was just what they were like, and I convinced myself that it was just a different way of training that was needed. Anyway, so that was a long drawn out thing, and that was about 10 years ago, 11 years ago. And I wanted to be the best dog trainer ever, blah, 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 or dog owner. And in that process, I lost one of the hounds for chasing sheep. He was shot by a farmer. And that devastated me, obviously, but that made me more convinced that I wanted to be the best dog owner ever, and I was going to mend my ways and make everything work. It was still difficult, and at the same time I was also doing a training in energy therapy. I was working full-time, but I wanted to change, and I was working as a complementary therapist. So I was learning all about our energy and our aura and how we're connected without most people, well, not most people, but you know, mainstream health doesn't talk about being connected energetically in that way. So that was all my background. And I also started to notice the links between my emotions and my dogs. There was one particular time when I was a really nervous driver, and I would be trying to overtake on the motorway and I wouldn't even move. I'd just be thinking about it. And I started to notice that my Hamilton Stowell that I had left, Jack, would stand in the back of the up in the back of the car and start looking around for all the dangers. And at first I didn't realise what that was about, but then I started to realise it was exactly coincided with that, just as I was thinking about overtaking. So that was a really good example of what I started to see much more often. So I started looking into it, and I came across, as Leah's already said, Kevin Behan's book, Your Dog is Your Mirror. And I was just like, I was in tears half the time reading it because it was resonated so much with me. And one of the quotes out of Kevin's book, which really I've stuck with all the way through, was, once we tell ourselves the truth about what we truly feel, the dog will no longer act it out. Your dog is your mirror, as Leah said, got me, I was already looking in this area, but he sort of confirmed to me that, you know, dog trainers see this all the time, this emotional link. And then also after that, I myself went off with stress, had a bad stress experience where things had built up and got too much for me. So I became to understand firsthand how, if you don't listen to your feelings and stay connected with your feelings, that your feelings will sort of overtake you. So that was my sort of my background into it, sort of mental health issues, etc., quite a few years ago now. And that started my journey of learning about my own feelings, and also linked to the dogs and the emotions. I don't know, I'm wobbling on. You should stop me if I start making too much talk.
No, it was great. No, it was great. So you did notice a really direct correlation, like the example that you gave when you were thinking about overtaking, which I think means crossing on the highway.
Yes.
Okay. Little language barrier here. So even just having that thought, I'm sure internally your nervous system was sort of getting you ready. However the dog picks up on it, whether it's electromagnetic or it's hormonal and pheromones, and there's a scent, or there's, I don't know, biochemical, I don't know. The dog is picking up on your stress when you're even just thinking about doing something where you have to be on high alert, and then the dog sort of acts that out for you. So I think that was a good example, and there are many more. I guess my question is, when you're working with owners, dog owners today, what are some of the most common issues you see people having with their dogs, in terms of the dog sort of acting out either an unresolved emotion or a high level of stress that's being experienced in the household? And I don't know if you want to name some common problems or give some more examples.
Well, probably that one thing I don't do is I don't work with the dog. I don't even meet the dog. And sometimes the clients that come to me, basically their issue is they have a problem with their dog, and that is how they feel about their dog. So it could be a loss, it could be behavioural, it could be making a decision that they have to make about their dog, rehoming, having them put to sleep, something like that. So it's really, they feel bad about their dog, and that's it. I don't really sort of have a good feel. I don't really see enough of the dogs to know exactly what the problems are, because it's what the owner feels about the problem, as opposed to having a sort of judgment comment about the dog. So I can't really answer that very easily.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Okay. So it's not really, you're not dealing directly with the dog and the dog's issues. You're dealing with the owner, whatever their emotional issues are, and then how they're feeling about the dog sort of tells you. Does that kind of tell you where to start?
I am led by the client. The client will come to me, and I use person-centered counselling, which, if anyone is knowledgeable about the psychotherapy or counselling environment, but it's basically it's a listening service, really, where I provide a space for clients to talk about. Initially, it's about the dog and how they feel about it, and in a totally confidential environment. So nobody knows that I'm talking to them. I would never repeat anything I hear. It's just like the standard counselling, confidential experience. And that's really important, because what I need to do is create an environment of trust where people can talk about anything, and because we hide a lot of stuff from ourselves and we don't want to admit things, so we really have to have an environment where they feel safe. And, you know, people can say anything they like to me, and it's not going to shock me. As you know, I've told you what's happened with my dogs, and, you know, and people don't like talking about things like that, you know. So yeah, so they will talk, and very often I don't know why this happens, but people, you know, listening, they're dog lovers and they will understand it. People talking about your dog seems to be able to open you up to emotions and stuff that you don't normally connect with. Something happens. I mean, even when I talk to people about what I do, and I say, "Oh, I'm worried about my dog. Maybe you could help me." And then within minutes, they're talking about a totally different issue. My husband's just and these aren't clients; these are just people that talk to me, which is why I'm sharing it. Oh, my husband just left hospital after having a heart bypass, and I need to help him get back to work. And it comes out from talking about problems with their dog. It's like it's strange. But having said that, I mean, I really think that we lose connection with a lot of our stuff, and the dogs respond to that stuff that we're lost connection with. So that's why it's really useful when we're experiencing a relationship with our dogs to start being more aware of ourselves. I'm just looking at the comments coming up.
Yeah, and I'll give a personal
Hi, Greg.
example.
Hi,
That,
Lindsay.
you know, Joe.
Sorry, carry on.
No, that's okay. And Sammy has a question I want to get to as well, but I was just going to give a personal example. Obviously, Joanne and I speak as friends, but she has offered a great deal of help for me. And as an example, like I talked with her about euthanizing one of my dogs, and then what came up for me was my mom's passing. So these related events, it was like whatever's happening, excuse me, with the dog, like we project into the dog experience, but it can often be about something totally different that it's obviously related. There's some commonality there. So yeah, that happens a lot. And I find that people do project so much into their dogs, and they'll be like, oh, I'm worried my dog is anxious about such and such, and it's really that like the person's really anxious, like I'm about to move, and so I'm like looking for signs that my dogs are really stressed out about the move, but actually I'm the one who's really stressed out and they are completely fine.
Yeah.
But I kind of want like an excuse to express that anxiety and have somebody else to take care of, because I kind of don't want to look at myself. So like I'd rather take care of my dogs having a problem than to like admit that I'm actually having a problem. So I think that's kind of a common thing that we do with our dogs. And then Sammy's question was, what is the first piece of advice you give to dog owners for them to get back in touch with their feelings? So if somebody's sort of dissociated or not aware that they're maybe projecting their own feelings or emotions into their dog, how would you go about helping them?
Well, first of all, they have to want to be helped. So I think I can personally say that if someone said to me, well, no, they have done. Dog trainers have said to me, I've been to a dog trainer who's told me that she can't do anything for my dog at the moment. She's too busy. And also she thinks I should take him to a homeopath for some herbal remedies. And I might be well advised to take some myself. So, and that's, that might be valid, and it probably is valid. And subsequently, I probably have done that, but it's not helpful. It doesn't help unless you're looking for it. That's what I'm trying to say. It's really difficult. I don't think I'm answering it very well, Sammy, but what I was gonna, because what the thing is, the things that I'm talking about, we've hidden them from ourselves. Maybe if I can give this example about my own, what I discovered and following natural dog training. And I had the Hamilton Stover. I'd lost his brother, as I said earlier on. I was determined to have a recall for this hound. I was going to be able to walk him off lead. And I was been working with natural dog training, which was really giving me some good results. We were in a field. I was with a friend that was a dog training behaviourist. She'd worked with me. I was showing her Kevin Behan stuff, and Jack was responding and running back to me. And she said to me at the time, she said, "That's amazing. I've never seen him be so switched on to you. I just think this is really going to work. And I should have been elated at that moment. But because I started noticing my feelings because of doing this stuff, the feeling I felt was sick in my stomach. And my feeling was, oh my God, if this dog wants to, if I've got to be responsible for this dog, I can't take the pressure. Oh my God, what am I going to do? And further on from that, I worked out that this was all keying into stuff that I'd had as a child with two younger brothers and sisters, always having to be the grown up and look after them and be responsible for them. And I didn't want it. I didn't want it anymore. And I didn't realize I had that trigger in me. And my belief is that the dog knows you've got it in you. Has got that trigger. They know that you don't really want them. You know, they can feel that conflict in you. And I think that's what causes us problems. But that's just my interpretation of what my experience is with my dogs. But that's how I feel it sort of manifests itself, with these things that you don't really know about yourself until you're in the position when you feel something, and you have to allow yourself to feel it and let it bubble up. And in a counselling environment where you're talking about things, you're encouraged to go with it, go with the feeling, not push it out. We're so good at pushing out the feelings and, oh no, I can't feel like that. I'll just work harder, or that sort of concept. I'm just seeing what Dawn's saying.
Yeah, so I think you explained it quite well, actually, is that the first step is to just start observing. And a good way to do that is when you're working with your dog, and whether things are going well, as you know, in your example, you actually were getting the result that you thought you wanted, but then the feelings that came up were sort of in conflict with that result, but you just observed those feelings and you were able to reflect on what that really meant for you, and you made a very deep connection to your past, which I think is, as I understand, that's kind of how your process is with when you're listening to your clients and sort of just helping them explore those observations. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, because what happens is humans are very good at putting stuff in our subconscious. I don't know if you call it subconscious or unconscious, subconscious. So, and that's really efficient because we don't want to have to consciously work out how to breathe and how to digest our food and how to walk down the street. But we also put into our subconscious stuff that we don't want to think about ourselves. So we might learn that, you know, we might have been told as a child that we were naughty or we weren't good at something. So that becomes part of our belief system. Or there might be stuff that we don't want to remember. So there's loads of good reasons for putting stuff into subconscious and not be consciously aware of it. But then there is other stuff that as we get older, the belief patterns that the distortions that we've got in our mind start to impact on us. And this isn't just about dog training, this is just about how we live our lives. And if we and I think what we tend to do is cut ourselves off from our emotions, don't let ourselves feel everything properly. So instead of feeling them, we react to them. So like, you know, when you lose your temper with your child or your dog, or you shout at them or something, that's when we're not actually noticing it bubble up until it shouts out. So I think I'm losing my train of thought. So what I'm trying to say is, so we have this is what happens to humans. So we become fragmented. We don't understand ourselves totally. We don't see all our bits. Like the worrying about the dog coming back to me means I've got more responsibility. But the dog sees it. The dog sees the whole part of it, and they feel our emotions even if we're not fully connected with them, and respond to them depending on the temperament of the dog. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense to me. I think what you're touching on is that when we're not fully present in the moment, we're not able to sort of channel our energy in the sort of most efficient or best, or in order to create flow. Instead, what's happening is we're trying to push feelings down, and then all of a sudden the intensity level gets too high because we're not processing those emotions. And then once that intensity reaches a certain level, we sort of then relive a past. I mean, this is my interpretation, my personal interpretation, that we just sort of we relive a past experience instead of staying in the present moment. So when we lose our temper, we're not really reacting. We may or may not be reacting to what's actually happening in that moment.
Yeah, it's a trigger.
We may be reliving. It's a trigger for unresolved emotions that So I think, I mean, that's how I interpret what you just said. Does that make sense?
Does it make sense to people listening?
The other comment we had was opening up with dogs around is very understandable because they don't disapprove or look down on us. And I think that's a good springboard maybe for why is it the dog? Like, I don't feel that my cat necessarily picks up on, I mean, she does to a certain extent, but she's much less, she's not knocked off balance so easily by my emotional flares, so to speak. Whereas the dogs are just super sensitive to any change, not even just to me, but even in the household. Like if my roommate is having a heated conversation on the phone or something like that, you know, the dogs will start they'll be on edge, whereas the cat doesn't really care.
Yeah.
So dogs seem to have this special ability to pick up on these emotions, to sort of channel them. They kind of sometimes I think store our emotions for us and then act them out. So they become a channel to express, you know, those unconscious or subconscious things we don't want to look at or deal with. Or
I mean, they feel
that
it.
been your
I think
experience?
I think they definitely feel it. I mean, and I mean that I really and it's important because, well, it's important for humans anyway to try and be more self-aware, but it's important when you're trying to train your dog or do stuff with your dog and you feel, and you're maybe following a process or a you know, some guidance, but if you're not thinking about what you're feeling, you're totally sabotaging what you could be doing with the dog, if you see what I mean, because you might be thinking, I've got to do this, as I was, because otherwise, you know, life will not be worth living. I won't be able to walk my dog off the lead. That's not helpful if that's what the dog's getting, because that's what the dog's getting. The other day, I've got a lab who, according to the vet, is considered to be on the autistic scale, if you can believe that. I think it's probably just my fault, but anyway, I was doing some loose lead walking with him the other day, and I was like, you know, we're doing all right. And then I was thinking he was all getting a bit stressed. And then I thought about myself, how was I feeling? And I just let out this breath. And he shook himself immediately at the same time. It was almost like I'd given him position. Oh my God, thank God you've got rid of all of that. Now I can get rid of it as well. So it's like, it's really important, you know, when we're working with our dogs, for us to appreciate that. And I guess good dog trainers already are you know, they know that. I mean, they say it's important how you feel, but if we're the sort of person that's gone, oh, I don't like that, I'm not going to feel that, then we lose touch of that, and so we can't feel as well with the dogs, and we can't have the same communication with the dogs.
Right. So the more self-aware we are, and the more we can sort of check in with ourselves, what's going on internally, you know, maybe in that moment,
I think
we shouldn't, or go ahead.
I think the first step that I don't think it's easy work, right? I don't think it's easy work. If you're someone that struggles with dog training and you want to do better, I don't think it's easy work, but you need to. It's helpful if you can notice the feelings. And quite often, you know, like you're stressed out, like say walking along the road and your dog keeps lunging and you're trying to do loose lead walking, and what you might be thinking is, oh my God, I wish you wouldn't do that. I don't want to pull him on the neck. Oh God, what, this is so awful. It's never going to work, right? Okay, so that's probably quite a common feeling for people to have. that isn't going to work. And so, you know, experienced dog trainers will say, well, don't do it anywhere near the shops or anything like that where it's not ready for all of that, whatever type of dog trainer. But you'll be having this, oh, but I want to have, you know, my dog free and I want my dog to be with me. I mean, I'm laughing at myself here. I'm not parroting anyone else. And those are all our emotional needs and these things that we're hanging on to. So the point about, so the first thing is to notice how we feel and be able to notice it properly. I had another experience a few years ago, and I was really, it's not to do with dogs, but I was upset because a decorator had knocked a swallow's nest down from the house. And a few months later, and I just was a bit upset about it, but he'd said, oh, I've done you a favour, and I didn't say anything. Anyway, a few months later, the swallows came back and they were squawking around outside. And I was like, oh my God, the nest is gone. I feel so awful. And I never told the painter and decorator what I thought of him. And I never told him off. And I was like all this, telling myself how wrong I was. And then I thought, well, hang on a minute, Joanne, listen to how you feel. What's going on? Let yourself, you know, do what you tell other people to do. And I was like going, and then I could feel this whole wave of awfulness. And it was all about breaking up the family home, getting a divorce. What about the kids? Nothing to do with the swallow. Well, the swallow started it. And then I was in tears. And so that trigger, so that emotion I was trying to push away, when I let it in, that's what it opened up. But it also allowed it to go quicker. So like, oh my God, that's really interesting. I think I'll blog about that, you know, because it was no longer held down. And really interesting on that story is the swallow actually came in the kitchen a few days later. They rebuilt their nest, they lived there again, and this swallow just came in. I had to take it back off the window ledge, and I was like, oh gee, thanks. so what,
oh my gosh.
So what I'm saying about that is it's really easy to feel bad and go, oh, I'll have a chocolate, I'll have a cup of tea, I'll watch the telly, I'll have a glass of wine. You know, those are all, or I'll do something, I'll clean the house, or it's really easy to walk away from feeling bad, but it's much more effective to feel it and let it move on, but it's not easy. Sorry.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. No, my thing is definitely cleaning the house. I feel uncomfortable. Oh, it must be because the house is dirty. But what you're saying is, and it was so poignant what you just said about the swallows, and it was really about your own household and family being broken up, and it was like a direct correlation. But I think what you're saying is, when we start having those uncomfortable feelings, if we can just sort of be with those feelings, even just give them a small opening, they'll start to move and almost resolve themselves if we just stop pushing them away.
I do believe that, but I also think we've got a lot of reasons to keep them put down. So that's why, you know, sometimes it's good to have help, you know, to be held safely to be able to do that. But certainly if you start to notice when you're with your dog how you feel, particularly if you're not happy with the relationship, just notice how you feel and what that brings up for you, and if you've ever felt like that before, or you know, just what. But it's this concept of not pushing it away, which I can't even explain how to do it. You sort of have to feel it yourself, but not to be scared of feeling bad. And it's not easy, and this stuff isn't easy because you're asking yourself to look at stuff that you've put away because you wanted to keep it out of the way. Sorry, this is maybe getting a bit deep for people that are listening. I don't know.
No, I mean, it's right up my alley. I was just going to say, you know, sometimes for good reason, sometimes we're not ready to look at that stuff. So we're just not asking people to start unpacking their whole emotional history in one go, but maybe like a little bit at a time. Just, I think what happens is we start having a feeling that makes us uncomfortable, and we're afraid if we actually stop and experience it, or are open to it, that like it's going to open some sort of floodgate and then it just won't ever end.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
I know that's how I have felt at times. Yeah, like if you let this one little feeling in, that like, oh, what if then all the feelings come in,
I mean, Joe,
and it just doesn't stop.
Joe's put a comment there, push through is where we learn, I think. I think you're right. I think you're right, Joe. But it's when you're ready, and what, you know, you've got to do little bits at a time. But it is also to be aware of how our dogs are twigged into it. Little steps, absolutely, Bethan.
So do you want to talk about the specific process? I mean, I know you did a little bit about when somebody calls you and they're saying, hey, I'm having this problem with my dog. I don't know, an example, my dog won't come to me when called, or my dog pulls on a lead, I can't walk her down the street anymore. How do you start with that?
Well, it's mostly about empathizing with the client first off. There's really, you know, that must be really difficult. That's hard. And inviting a space, like not necessarily saying anything and waiting and listening, and for the client to sort of follow through on what actually they talk about. And what tends to happen is people just start talking, open up. If you can give them the space and make them know that they can be heard and there's not going to be any judgment. I mean, that's another thing about the dog training industry or dog industry. Thank you, Nicolas. Dog training industry is, this is going to sound argumentative. I find it very judgmental, right? Now, that's partly a reflection of how I am. I am a very judgmental person and learning how to be better, very critical. But, you know, everybody's always arguing on the right way to do things with dogs. What's the right training method? So that's a pressure in itself for people. And so I think people are worried that if I shouted at my dog, or I use this method, or I do this, or I let him sleep on the bed, or all of these things that you're told that you can't do or you can do, or I would never shout at your dog. People say you would never shout at your dog. You mustn't do that. Well, you shouldn't shout at your kids either, but hands up, how many people have actually can say they've never done it? It's those sort of things, I think it may, and maybe, you know, as the sort of person that I am, I want to be the best possible. I don't want to be awful. I want to, you know, treat everybody kindly and everything. So I'm my own worst critic. Anyway, so I find it very judgmental. So I think that environment of having a space where you can talk openly about how you feel about your dog helps people, and they respond to it very well, because it isn't a judge, you know. And also, when you're walking down the street with your dog, and whatever its behavior is, that's a direct, everybody's looking at you, or you can go, oh my God, everybody thinks I can't walk my dog, or I'm a terrible owner and I must be horrible. You know, what are you laughing at?
Right. Yeah, no, just I have that same feeling, like if my dog doesn't act a certain way, or doesn't stay in line, or maybe is, you know, two of my dogs are rescues and they're reactive to other dogs, and I just feel like there's this judgment on me, like, why would you have a dog like that, you know? And why haven't you fixed that dog
why haven't you fixed that dog?
What are you doing wrong? Why haven't you resolved this dog, you know, her issues 100%? You're a dog trainer, like, fix this dog.
Yeah.
It's like, well, this is a huge task. And also, I think you brought up a good point with the whole mentality of dog training is often it's like, this is the way you do it. This is how your dog should be. If you do everything the way you're supposed to, then the dog will do everything you want them to. And that just isn't always the case. And a lot of times I think we actually get hung up on projecting the way things should be. And my dog should be able to do this by now. And we should be able to go to the dog park and we should be able to walk down the street like in a certain way, in a certain manner without having any issues. And it's like, 'cause sometimes it's just a denial of reality. Like, this dog has a lot of issues. I need to look at my own issues, and maybe one day, yeah, maybe we'll achieve that. Maybe we won't. Maybe we can just be happy with where we are right now.
And that's a really good point about the reality, because I think when I'm saying we hide bits of ourselves off, we're actually looking through a different mirror than the reality of things. So we've cut bits of ourselves off. We're not looking at them. We keep them out of the way. But our dog makes us face the whole reality of that it can't walk calmly on the lead because, you know, it's stressed out by whatever. I mean, I have looked at that quite a lot just recently, and I'm a bit horrified to find how I feel about meeting people on the street and talking to them. And I'm thinking, you know, someone I don't know very well, and I start garbling and I don't talk very well. And then I notice how anxious I feel about it. Well, gee, if that's what I'm projecting around this way, no wonder the dogs are being like that. So I think it may actually be about the dogs are forcing us to face the reality as opposed to our nice little world that we'd like to pretend that we're living in. I don't know if that makes any sense to people. My God.
I mean, it does to me. I think it really just puts it right out in the open. Like, your dog is acting a certain way, there's a reason, you know, and your feelings about the way they're acting are, you know, clues to what's going on with your own emotional.
There was one time when I was a few years ago, and I was staying at a friend's. I was visiting her, and I was about to leave, and she had this toy poodle, and we were talking. We were about to leave, we go to the front door, and it was yapping its head off. And she said, well, what do I do about that then? What am I supposed to do about that? And I said, well, I don't know, but how are you feeling? And she said, oh, I'm really looking forward to seeing you again. I don't know when you're coming back. And I'm wondering, all right. Well, I said, well, how about you play with it? She's a counsellor, right? And I said, how about you work with that feeling? Oh, yeah, I will see you soon. The dog shut up. The dog stopped barking. Well, I don't know what that was about, but
wow,
because I feel she was like all excited like that, and I'm the same. I get really excited about with something, and the dogs. You know, somebody comes to the door, and I'm going, "Oh my God, what is it? I'll get the dogs out of the way. I don't want them to run out the door." And they're all yapping their heads off. And if you go, another funny story. You know how my Labrador has a tendency to hump when he gets overexcited, and this was a few years ago. And I was sitting there quietly on my own with the dogs around me, and he was getting restless, and he was jumping, he was licking my ear, and he's moving around. And I was thinking, oh God, in a minute he's going to hump me. I don't want to push him off. And so I just went inside and went, how am I feeling? And I was thinking about someone I had a relationship with, and I was thinking about it. How did I feel? And I felt, oh God, I felt really awful. Well, he stopped. He just calmed down. He didn't hump me. He just lay down beside me. And it was almost like they can feel this stuff coming up in you, and they need to move it for you, whatever way is their method. And so, you know, when things, if you can do it in an environment where there's no danger, like your dog's not going to get run over, or, you know, if you're in your own house and they're doing something that irritates you, check in and see what's going on. You might find something out. You might not.
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, so just by observing the internal, I call it the internal landscape, but it's really about being in touch with being embodied as opposed to being dissociated from your body and emotions.
Yeah, and we're not. That's right. Yeah. Because we've got to get things done.
I actually
Sorry, carry on.
Oh yeah, we have to be productive. We don't have time to like sit and reflect on what's going on inside. I actually just took an embodiment workshop yesterday, which was so interesting. And I think little practices like that, taking time to develop our own self-awareness, that's like a good starting point and then go back to trying to achieve this certain thing with your
Yeah.
dog training. But
Yeah.
if you really are dissociated from your body, you can't feel your emotions, because that's the whole point of dissociating, is to protect ourselves from emotions that are overwhelming. And Sammy had a comment here, or a question. Do you find that when people start to bring their emotions and feelings to the surface, that their dogs and their relationship with the dog tends to improve?
Well, you'd have to ask the clients, but the clients come back and they say they feel better about it, and they have made, but I haven't, you know, I don't observe the dogs. I don't have anything to do with the dogs, but the clients feel better about their dogs. That's all I can say. And I think they feel better about other things as well, not just the dogs. So I think so. Joe, Bethan's got.
I'll just say.
Sorry.
Oh,
Bethan's
go ahead.
got a comment.
No, go ahead.
About your lab, Bethan. Oh, right, that was to Joe, and that's a humping you on the back. There's a stress reaction. Yeah, so there's another one, which is due to your anxiety, yeah, and a habit, definitely. And Nicolas saying, maybe dogs only see us, not the human projection of ourselves. Exactly. One thing that people talk about, natural dog training anyway, but you know, when you watch a homeless person walking around with their dog, they're not on the lead. They're not snapping reactively at people going past, are they? You know, they're just living. And I think that's right. There's all this projection stuff going on, who we want to be, and who we're pretending to be. And the dog, I think a homeless person wandering about is just existing. I mean, I can't speak for homeless people, but that's what you see with their dogs. They don't seem to have any handling problems, do they?
No, they don't. They usually have the calmest, most well-behaved, perfect off-leash obedience. And then
they sleep on their bed.
You know, the rest of us are all like, yeah.
Thank you, Nicola Cameron.
Yeah, Sammy says they aren't pretending to be anyone. They're just going about their thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will say also, just my own personal experience with a question that Sammy asked, you know, once I started sort of dealing with my own stuff instead of projecting all of it on my dogs, I noticed a huge difference in the way my dogs react to me, their general stress level. Like I said, we're moving. We've been in this house for 3 years. We're moving April 1st. I've already started packing up the house, packing up my closet, and I'm looking at my dogs like, shouldn't they be stressed out? Can't they tell that like this is a stressful situation? But like they're really not at all. And I think like I don't feel super stressed out, but I'm a little anxious. But I think since I've become more embodied and more self-aware, that like I'm able to sort of contain and deal with my emotions and not project them right away onto the dogs, and not use the dogs as like sort of an emotional sponge. So like it creates this kind of nice feedback loop, where before I was stuck in this feedback loop where like I was stressed out, I'd put it on the dogs, then the dogs were stressed out, they'd act out, which gave me even more reason, sort of like creating my own reality. Now I have a real reason to be stressed out because my dogs are acting out or fighting or reacting to everything. And now it's like the opposite. I've become more self-aware, more grounded, and able to channel my own emotions in healthy ways. So the dogs don't have to act that stuff out for me. That's my experience.
Yeah. Nicola, your youngest dog always barks like mad when we start to leave the house. What's going on with you? Does it irritate you? Are you excited to go out? I don't know. That it is about what it means to yourself. Well, I was going to say also about the dogs having different behaviours. Another experience I've had, I had 3 dogs at the time: the lab I've got now, the Hammy, and also I had a trail hound. And another time when I was off ill, and it's a bit irritating. So anyway, with these 3 dogs, so all dogs are different. So you've got 2 dogs. I'm talking about these 3 dogs. So sitting in the conservatory, these three dogs all lying around, and at the time I was, you know, keeping to myself. I'd been off with stress, and I'd just be sitting, and then maybe tears would come up and I'd start crying. And the three dogs, the lab would be like, come over and start licking me. The hammy, great big 35-kilo dog, would sit in my lap, but slowly just sit there. The trail hound, every single time, would leave the room. As soon as it felt the emotion coming up, he was off. It was just bizarre. I mean, they had different behaviors, and I wasn't even moving. I was just like, tears coming down. It's right, weird, really weird. So
each dog reacted
yeah,
differently.
to the energy of the. Kevin described it as energy. When your tears come, then you're letting go of a lot of energy, and that the dogs react to that. And another similar sort of thing about being upset. I was down in the field with my Hamilton, who never gets let off the lead apart from in the field. And when he's off the lead, he was off sniffing and, you know, looking for mice and stuff. And and so on this particular occasion, he's off doing his sniffing, and I checked my phone. I'm not always on my phone when I'm with my dogs, but on this occasion, I was waiting for someone to come back to me about something. And I was devastated about the response I got. I was so upset. I'd been looking forward to this, and I was really upset. And I just was kneeling there on the ground. Next thing, the Hamilton, who was right up next to me, this hound that never ever comes back, was right up next to me. And I'm sure he was reacting to that emotion. He was reacting to something. So then I thought, well, the recall is going to be easy. All you got to do is walk along the road in tears, and he'll never leave your side. What's that about?
Oh.
So anyway.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, Nicola.
So is there a way that we can cultivate, is there a way that we can cultivate sort of good feelings and sort of project really nice things and sort of expect good things to happen? Or what is
I'm just laughing at Nicola, quite funny, because I'm equally excited not at all to go to work. I think it's about letting go of the stuff that we're holding on to. I don't think it's about making ourselves think good thoughts, although that helps. I think it's about, there is an element of wanting to feel the good thoughts and not look for the bad. But I do think there's a lot about letting go of things, letting go of our beliefs. So if you build positive thoughts on top of flaky foundations, then I don't think you're doing yourself any favors. I think there is a lot about letting go of stuff. So if it feels uncomfortable, believe it's uncomfortable, feel the uncomfortable, let it go, and then, you know, and be aware of when you make yourself feel uncomfortable. I mean, if you wake up in the morning, and I've read other people do this, so it's not just me, and you go through this inventory of, oh no, I'm no good at this, I'm no good at this, I'm no good at that, I might as well stay in bed, I'm rubbish. You know, sometimes that hits you. And then realizing that actually that's just a feeling, and it's not actually you. It could be to do what you've eaten, it could be to do with the fact that you went to bed late, but it will pass. This is all a bit, this isn't very scientific, and I'm not sure I'm explaining it very well, but the idea that you just to get more comfortable with how you feel and not be scared of how you feel, positive or negative.
mm-hmm.
It's easy to say.
Right. I get what you're saying. You're saying don't, because there is this whole movement, there has been for a long time, I think, of like the power of positive thinking. And what you're saying is you can't just layer the positive thinking on top of what's actually going, the reality of how you're actually
I don't
feeling.
think you can. I think you need to connect all your bits together. That's what holy really means, wholeness. So all the bits that have come dismantled from how you were brought up, or maybe from your genetics, or, you know, past traumas in your ancestry, things that happened to you when you were a kid, all of those things, you break bits off of you and you want to hide them away. And it's about bringing them all back so you can be your authentic self. That's really, and I think when you're your authentic self, then the dogs can follow you.
Oh, that reminded me of an example I had actually talked to you about on Skype one time. sort of this along this theme of just being authentic. Like it's not necessarily about always being positive and happy, but just being true to who you are in that moment. And it also relates to this idea of that like we should never shout at our dogs. And like so I try to follow that, and I try to also always be calm and be a certain way, the way I think I should be. And what I'm doing in the process is just sort of stuffing feelings and not being true to the reality of the situation and the reality of what I'm feeling in the moment. And so I kind of like go along. And then all of a sudden I couldn't take it anymore. My dogs were just irritating me. And I just like from this real authentic place, I just told them to cut it out. And it was like,
I remember you saying that.
Okay, they listened to me. Finally, it was just so clear. I was just so fed up, and it wasn't a big thing. I did raise my voice, but it was like this very authentic, like, I'm angry right now and I need you to stop that. And it was like there was no conflict, there was no issue. I had clearly communicated exactly the way that I was feeling, and I was being 100% authentic in the moment, and they were like, okay, cool.
I think that is the key. It's about you're congruent. What you're thinking and what you're showing is all makes sense. You're not saying one thing and thinking another, because the dogs can sense it. I think that is really valid. Yeah, what you're saying. What have we got? I think there was a question from Sammy earlier on, wasn't there, about rescue dogs?
Oh, yeah. She wants to know, oftentimes rescue dogs come with past trauma and behavioral issues, even with a new owner. So do you find that it's a good opportunity for us to have no expectations and just go with the flow? Like you're saying, let it go.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got a philosophy that, which I think probably other people share, that whatever dog you've got is with you for a reason. If you consider all the energy of the universe as energy and like attracting like, etc., then whatever problems you get with your dog are something to show you. Even if you don't believe that, we get growth in our problems. So, if you've got a problem with your dog, then it's showing you something about yourself. That's my sort of feeling about it.
So you're saying even oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You're saying even with a rescue dog that like you didn't necessarily create those issues in the dog, they kind of came with that emotional baggage. There's some resonance there between the human and the dog.
Yes, I think there's either resonance or it's there to teach the two of you something, the dog and the owner. It doesn't really, I suppose you can get in a muddle of saying, have you gone, Leah? You've gone frozen. You can get in a muddle of saying, oh, it happened. I know you've just frozen video. Depending on what your belief is, that it's happening for a reason. But even because when bad things happen, we learn from them. Bad things is where we get our growth from. So if you've got a problem dog that you've a rescue and it's got issues, then it's there for you to work through, because that's your tough stuff. Even with a new owner, you find it's a great, what's the rest of it? Yeah, well, the owner's got to, whatever way they've got their dog, is that it's their stuff to work through. I don't think it's necessarily created by the owner. I mean, but I do suffer from thinking it's all my fault, any of my dog's behaviour, but I don't think that's actually accurate. I think it's much more about what do I mean? You affect each other. We all affect each other.
Yes.
So
that feedback, that emotional feedback.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So you can change it. And so, like, for example, I was thinking about your questions earlier on when I was waiting for this call, and I feel if someone's got, only speaking from my own experience, people don't necessarily want to hear this, but I feel if someone's struggling with their dog and they can't get them to do what they want them to do, then it's because there's a conflict in me. There's something in me, like the recall business with the hound, that's stopping me getting what I want. like the training with my lab because I might not be trying as hard as I could be because I'm scared of failing. So it's better to just not bother trying. It's, oh, it's difficult, he's difficult, you know. So I think there, because you can have, what is it? There is something in NLP, they say there's no unresponsive clients. There's a, I can't remember what it is. It's about communication. The communication is the meaning of the communication is the result that you got. It's not what you meant it to be, it's the result that you got. That's what the meaning of the communication is. Does that make sense? So if you didn't like the result you got, you have to change how you're communicating. And so if you can't change how you're communicating, you won't change your results. I'm getting a bit sort of, I'm starting.
Okay, great.
I think it's too late. I think I'm starting to make a lot of.
Yeah, no, we need to wrap it up because we've been on for an hour. But I think, you know, and there are some other questions that we can address in the comments, or, you know, we can do this again and have another discussion.
Yeah, no, that'd be good.
But I think, you know, this is kind of a good place to actually wrap up, because I think we hit on all the points that I personally wanted to make and was interested in hearing from you. I think, do you want to just make sort of a closing statement?
Yeah,
or
no,
one last
I was just looking to see if,
you want to
no,
make?
we had got something in there about doing things with your dogs, but it's maybe not appropriate now, is it? About we were going to talk about fun things.
Oh, I put at the end, what are some fun things we can do with our dogs to help them with their stress and unresolved emotions?
And I said that over to you.
Yeah, I think that's a whole, I mean, I could go on for hours about that. So I think we might need to break that out in a different session, because there are specific things. There was a question about how do we help dogs with trauma, and there, you know, there's a laundry list of
You've come back.
things that we could, we'll have to come back and address how to actually work with the dogs. Joanne's specialty is, you know, holding space and creating this, opening for the human to start becoming self-aware, which I would say is actually the first step in then turning around and helping the dog. So I think it makes sense what we talked about, and it's kind of a good springboard for the next talk about actually doing some work with the dogs if we want to have another conversation.
Well, thank you.
What do you think?
Another talk. If anyone wants to put comments in and say what they'd like to hear more of as well, it would be great. And we'll share this video out as well for people that weren't able to watch it. Dawn, I don't think, ever got to hear from us, so she'll be able to watch it. And be interested to hear, you know, any more thoughts you have on it after you've talked to your dogs, etc. I'm hungry for more of Joanne and Leah. How nice, Jo. I thought you were going to say you were hungry and you were going off for your tea.
Thank you, guys.
I really appreciate everyone.
Oh, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, it's been great. I really appreciate everyone hanging in there and for your comments. It's been lovely. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Leah, for getting me out.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Joanne. This was so, you know, enlightening, as all of our conversations have been. It's just now we're having them in public instead of our own personal sessions. So, all right. So I think we're going to wrap it up, and we'll respond to any comments that we didn't get to online afterwards. We'll also be posting this video, you know, on Joanne's page, Hounds Connect. So if you haven't liked her page, you can look for Hounds Connect, like the page, get notifications, and make sure to join our next event.
And the same for yours. What's your Canine Core Method? Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, Leah.
Oh, Canine Core Method.
Yeah, that's Leah's.
Yeah, thanks. All right, take care.
Bye then.
Bye.